This module focuses on the swinging 60s. In this unit, we will look at the age of affluence, the mods and rockers, the White House influences, fashion designers, pop art, op art, the space age, the Afro look, the unisex look, the emergence of style tribe design, hippies and gypsies, the beatniks, the impact of Americana, the new consumer society, throwaway consumer goods, the style revivals, icons and designers. The design legacy that America passed on to the post-war world was twofold. The professional structure for the practice of industrial design was emulated on a worldwide scale, and consultant design offices sprang up in many countries all over the world, among them Britain, Germany, Sweden, Italy and Japan. The other major contribution lay in the area of mass culture. While the exhibitions at the Museum of Modern Art in New York had put European products on a pedestal captioned "Good Design," on the streets outside, the tail-finned extravagances from the assembly lines of General Motors, Ford and Chrysler began to arouse a different kind of interest. Coupled with the impact of Hollywood movies, advertisements and pop music, an alternative idea of American culture emerged that was soon to invade the homes and streets on industrialized nations the world over. The consumer society expanded and focused mainly where material goods were concerned. The American home was illustrated widely in advertisements with bulging, bulbous fridges, food mixers, deep freezers, dishwashers, and electric can openers that dominated the space's open-plan American kitchen. These were the Coca colonization years. The USA poured financial aid into Europe, and America spread its culture over the capitalist world, thereby affecting the lives of millions of people. The booming economy had an effect on America's approach to styling and what came to be called built-in obsolescence. Critics attacked the evils of styling, the object obsolescence, but they had little restraining influence on the far-reaching effects of American-style consumer marketing. The teenager quickly became one of the most important consumers of all. The youth market emerged with considerable disposable income to spend on luxury goods and lifestyle accompaniments like motorbikes, motor scooters, transistor radios, hi-fi equipment, and etc. Rock and roll imported from America brought numerous stylistic implications with it for fashion goods and consumer durables. Women, too, were financially more independent than ever before and represented a more powerful market where goods for the home were concerned. It was now possible to talk not only of mass style but also mass styles. Industrial society had become richer and more fragmented, and as a result, design became more pluralistic. Pre-war design philosophy of functionalism died out in the atmosphere that accepted eclectic, open-ended approach towards design and style, which welcomed both the throwaway ethic and the idea of symbolic appropriateness in objects, seeking to fulfill short-term rather than long-term needs. Towards the end of the decade, the optimism of the early years was replaced by the growing awareness of the economic reality of a looming recession, with the feeling that there must be more to design than just style and fun. In the 1960s, Mary Wells, who worked for the advertising company Wells, Rich and Green, had a vision for helping to brand Braniff Airlines. She worked under the assumption that the airlines were all perceived to be the same. She set out to break that mold and launched a campaign for Braniff called The End of the Plain Plane. The campaign launched a new look for all things Braniff: the planes, the airport lounges, the food, and the hostess uniforms. The uniforms were critical for helping to establish the breakaway Braniff image. The infamous Emilio Pucci was hired to create a look that brought glamour back to air travel. Bright, bold colors and designs became the mark of friendly service and exciting travel for Braniff. Pucci's first uniform for the company referenced his own jet-setting cafe society clientele and the glamorous, exclusive nature of air travel at the time, with a luxurious sportswear wardrobe fashioned out of eye-popping bright coral red, hyacinth blue, melon, and grass green silks and wools. The reversible swing coat even appears to have had hand-stitched lapels. Hostesses could make 4 outfit changes in a single flight. In the late 1960s and 1970s, the costume skewed more sexy than classy, with miniskirts and matching tights in far-out psychedelic prints. Incredibly, in the late 1960s, the uniform included full-length fur coats for stewardesses on the Greenland and Iceland routes. The plastic bubble helmet to protect hairdos on windy tarmacs was an integral part of the Pucci-designed uniforms, but was phased out after 1965 for being impractical. Other prominent fashion houses that designed for the airline in the 60s and 70s include Dior for SAS, Balenciaga for Air France, Pierre Cardin for Pakistani Airlines, Pierre Balmain for Singapore Airlines, Hannah Mori for Japan Airlines, Mary Quant for Courtline Aviation, Bill Blass for American Airlines, and Valentino and Ralph Lauren for TWA. Consumerism drove a wedge between parents and their young. Identified as rebellious, the young were cobbling their own lifestyle from a patchwork of contemporary sources. Warhol's unashamed celebration in paint of commercial culture was picked up, as were Liechtenstein's impactful comic book imagery and Bridget Riley's dazzling optical tricks. Resisting the shifting conformity that consumerism can induce, an alternative drug culture dropped out, and barbed in Eastern robes saw its destiny through a swirl of psychedelic colors. At the sensible end, escapism meant craft revival and rural nostalgia. Meanwhile, technology strived for the moon, and futurist fantasies clothed by Cardin and Corregs and coiffed by Vidal Sassoon graced fashion pages. The British pop movement started in the early 60s by artists such as David Hockney, Alan Jones, Derek Boshier, and Ron Kitaj. The Independent Group, a group of artists, critics, and architects, came together to understand and analyze icons of American mass culture. They helped in both isolating and marketing intellectually respectable notions such as bright colors, pop imagery derived from comic books, science fiction, and advertising, and other instantly appealing visual qualities such as surface pattern, and mixing them with abstract concepts like object symbolism and expendability, which were to become central features of the pop design movement a decade later. Pop art stressed on fun, lifestyle, expendability, and symbolism, and rejecting austere forms and any emphasis on utility. These themes summed up the optimistic nature of an affluent society which stressed youthful values and worshipped innovation. Many young designers who moved into this area were eager to break the barriers between the areas of fashion, graphic, and product design. The most visible surface patterns from the mid-60s included flags, bullseye, stripes, and other pop and op motifs. These were borrowed from the works of artists like Jasper Johns, Victor Vasarely, and Bridget Riley. Symbolic themes like those of space travel and the child were frequently used. These themes summed up the optimistic nature of an affluent society which stressed youthful values and worshipped innovation. The first people to make pop design movement a reality came from within the fashion industry, and clothing was the first area to be revolutionized by the growing emphasis on the youth market. John Stevens was the man behind Carnaby Street. For the young female consumer, Mary Quant opened Bazaar, thereby pioneering the principle of boutique, a small, personalized shop which was to dominate female fashion retailing throughout the 60s. Mary Quant introduced the miniskirt to Britain and rejected traditional French haute couture by using young, unsophisticated, even gawky models. Her play outfits, which included a plastic Mac plus Suester set called Christopher Robin, and a pinstripe suit called the Bank of England redefined the way young women thought about clothing. Other designers of this movement were Marion Fole, Sally Tuffin, and Ossie Clark. In France, André Courreges broke away from his native haute couture tradition, creating space-age outfits, complete with visors, white miniskirts, and ankle boots. By the mid-60s, the search for style that was inspired from contemporary phenomena had virtually exhausted, and the process for raiding the past for inspiration started in earnest. Paisley shirts suddenly broke in among the pop and op patterns, and Victorian decorations appeared on the surface of furnitures. Tea cloths, curtains alongside pop Union Jacks and stripes. Nostalgia for this new style was accompanied by yearnings for the countryside, by small flower prints on cotton fabrics by Laura Ashley from original Victorian patterns. Interest in the past also led to reassessment of earlier methods of production as well as previous styles. The early 70s saw a sudden rebirth of concern with the craftsman and his objects. Craftsmen moved on to develop new forms with both new and traditional materials, inspired by ideas borrowed from minimal and conceptual art. Style tribes and street styles include the mods and rockers, the hippies, anti-war protesters and the adoption of jeans, punk styles, the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the White House influence, political events, space age, the fine arts, and the ethnic look. The rockers were rough and tough, rode motorcycles and wore black leather jackets. They vied with mods who were up for love, self-expression, poetry, and getting stoned. The mod fashion statement was elegant, long hair, granny glasses with Edwardian finery. The Beatles, then a popular music band, adopted the mod look and helped popularize it. One of the ideas central to the mod fashion was the notion that men and women were entitled to wear handsome, dashing clothing. Following the 1967 hippie gatherings, media coverage made colorful hippie costumes familiar. Long hair for men and women, beards, headbands, and love beads for men, long skirts, and gypsy-like costume for women. Hippies assembled imaginative costumes from used clothing bought in thrift stores. In 1968, Ken Scott, an American designer, designed a collection called the Hippie Gypsy. The young gathered at popular music concerts such as the Woodstock, the Art Fete, etc. The beads, feathers, and bandanas they wore were copied by others. The hippies were about communal living away from the cities, getting high, digging arts, clothes and crafts exhibits, and listening to songs of revolution. The interest in Indian religion may have been a factor in the widespread popularity of styles inspired or influenced by clothing from India. A peacock revolution started for men, emphasizing fanciful, colored and styled garments. In the 60s, young people protesting against the establishment adopted blue jeans as a symbol of solidarity with working people. In the 1955 movie Blue Denim, they were associated with youth and rebellion. Jeans became a sort of uniform for young anti-war protesters. They began to use jeans as a medium of self-expression with embroidery, painted and patchwork messages. Striving to dramatize their alienation through their garb, young fans of so-called punk rock music in 1977 began wearing messy, baggy, ripped-up clothes. Boys generally wore black leather and girls wore micro-minis with black fishnet stockings. Fabrics were purposely made with holes, tears, and stains. Accessories included safety pins worn as earrings or through the skin. Razors were also worn as piercings. Punks wore black eye makeup, two-toned purple lips, and hair painted green, yellow, and red. British fashion designer Zandra Rhodes quickly incorporated punk ideas into her 1977 collection, bringing the punk style to a wider audience. Some feminists in the 1960s saw clothing as symbolizing oppression. To dramatize their liberation from social as well as physical constraints, and to protest against the Miss America contest, which they saw as glorifying women for their beauty alone. A few feminists demonstrated and burned brassieres outside of the pageant in Atlantic City in the fall of 1968. While the majority of women did not abandon brassieres, many women stopped wearing corsets. Bra styles became less rigid, molded from knitted synthetic fibers rather than cut and sewn to produce maximum uplift, as in the 50s. Acceptance of garments for men and women that are similar, such as blue jeans and t-shirts and pantsuits, was symbolic of the changing roles of women in society. The civil rights movement brought with it a new consciousness of African culture, tradition, and art that was expressed in phrases "Black pride" and "Black is beautiful." Many African Americans adopted styles in dress that reflected this interest in their African heritage, like wearing dashikis, which is a traditional African garment. These and other garments were fabricated from textiles made in traditional designs such as kente cloth, mud cloth, tie-dye fabrics, and handsome embroideries. The afro hairstyle, full and fluffy and taking advantage of the curl natural to the hair of many African Americans, was widely adopted by both men and women. Cornrow braids were also worn by women. Jewelry was constructed in traditional designs, much of it imported from Africa, and utilized materials native to Africa, like amber, ivory, and ebony. Initially, these styles were worn both at work and at home, but in later years, the style was limited to leisure wear and continues to this day. The White House in Washington also influenced fashion. Media coverage made it possible for political personalities to be seen at work and play. Kennedy went bareheaded to his inaugural in 1961, after which hat use amongst men declined. Mrs. Kennedy became a major influence on styles. Bouffant hairstyles, pillbox hats, A-line skirts, low sling pumps, empire-style evening dresses, and wraparound sunglasses were some styles associated with Jackie Kennedy. Among political events, the influences from the Vietnam War were the adoption of jeans by youthful anti-war activists and some military-inspired styles. When Richard Nixon announced his intention to go to China in 1972, Chinese-influenced styles began to appear. From actual Chinese clothing to textiles, accessories, design motifs, and an adaptation of Chinese styles. Some fashion of the 60s reflected interest in the growing aerospace developments. Couturier André Courreges showed what he called a space-age collection in 1964. Fashion models wore helmets, and lines were precise and unadorned, and shapes geometric. Designers used materials similar to those required for the technological advances that accompanied space exploration. New materials like Velcro for closures, vinyl for rainwear and outerwear, etc. Paco Rabanne made dresses of square pieces of plastic held together with metal rings. The most extreme of these styles were not widely adopted, but clean geometric lines and plastic jewelry and accessories in geometric shapes were often seen. Op and pop art designs translated readily into fabric and soon appeared in fabrics for clothing. Yves Saint Laurent incorporated these op and pop art paintings into his designs. Art Deco and Art Nouveau designs were also revived during this period. The exhibition of the treasures from the tomb of Tutankhamun in the 70s revived Egyptian-inspired clothing and jewelry. The 70s also saw the origin of a combination of clothing and fiber art in what was known as wearable art that probably had its antecedents in the decoration of the textiles used for clothing by hippies. Fashion designers seemed to be looking everywhere for design inspiration. A source that they tapped into was ethnic clothing. Design inspiration came from a variety of sources such as Native American dress, styles from countries like India, from traditional Eastern European folk costume, and from Africa. The fashion industry also rapidly changed during this time. There was increasing variety in fashion segments, trickle-down and bottom-up theories. Attempts were made to curb fashion changes. Establishment's response to radical fashion changes. There were changes in fashion design, pret-a-porter, and ready-to-wear. Labeling and licensing was introduced. Designer jeans, logos appeared on garments. Important designers for men clothing included Pierre Cardin and John Weitz. During the period 1960 to 1974, for women, a new garment, part hosiery, part underwear, was introduced and was called pantyhose. Sheer in nylon and replaced nylon stockings held up with garters or girdle. Brassieres, underpants, slips, and girdles continued to be the most common items of women's underwear. Body stockings and bodysuits were also used. A new line for suits gained acceptance. Loosely fitted jackets, Chanel's braid-trimmed, collarless cardigan-style jacket with 3/4 length sleeves. Worn with an A-line skirt and a blouse and a bow tie at the neck, with sleeves extending a little beyond the jacket sleeves. Notable silhouettes of dress styles included empire waistlines, A-line shapes with dresses flaring slightly from neck to hem, dresses cut straight and loose from shoulder to hem, dresses falling straight from yoke at the shoulder, dresses unfitted through the torso and with a flounce joined to the hem of the dress at the knee. Long daytime dresses known as granny dresses were popular among the youth in the early 70s. A brief interest in paper dresses emerged in 1966. Matching pants and jackets were introduced just after mid-60s for daytime, business and evening wear. Evening dresses were made in both long and short lengths. Trends include short, straight dresses, some in vivid prints and others made of metallic fabrics or trimmed with sequins, paillettes of plastic or beads. In the late 60s, pantsuits of decorative fabrics with full-legged pants made in soft fabrics were also worn for evenings and were called palazzo pajamas. For sportswear, most skirts tended to be A-line, finished with facings at the waist. Knitted stretch pants with narrow legs were worn with straight or blouson tops. Jeans were worn predominantly. Hip huggers were jean styles that had a low waist and a wide flare or a bell-bottom legs, fitting smoothly at the hips. Hot pants were very short shorts. Tight figure-hugging fitted blouses gave way to looser styles, many with straight lines. Turtlenecks were amongst the most popular separate tops. Popular sweater styles includes the poor boy sweater. With regard to active sportswear, women adopted leotards for aerobic exercises. Leg warmers, loose-fitting, footless stockings were used for exercises and as a street fad among young women. Rudy Gernreich introduced a topless bathing suit called the monokini. Ski wear was made in bright colors and prints. Synthetic and down fillings were quilted into ski jackets and other sportswear for warmth. Styles worn at the Olympic Games influenced ski wear. In 1968, Olympic skier Suzy Shafi wore a sleek silver jumpsuit and began the trend towards one-piece unitard ski suits. Knickers and knee-length socks worn with sweaters and lightweight windbreakers also appropriate for cross-country skiing. At Wimbledon, England's Rosie Casals broke the tradition of wearing white to play tennis when she appeared in a tennis dress decorated with purple scrolls. By the late 70s, the quest for good health through fitness had led many men and women to jog, run, and work out. Manufacturers responded with new lines of warm-up suits, running and jogging clothing, and shoes, especially sneakers. New bouffant hairstyles, the fullness achieved by a technique of massing the hair called backcombing and or addition of artificial hairpieces, became stylish in the early 60s. Coraig's, Cardin and Quant had the hair of their models cut in almost geometric styles for their mid-decade collections. Hairstylist Vidal Sassoon helped make the geometric cut a popular alternative to long hair. Heels lowered at skirt length shortened. By the mid-70s, toes were rounded. In the early 70s, platform shoes ranging from small platforms to enormously high ones were added to all kinds of shoes and boots. Clogs with wooden shoes were especially popular. Accessories included small tailored bags, very large bags with round handles and/or shoulder straps and shoulder bags. Materials included leather and plastic imitations of leather, fabric and straw. Popular jewelry items included long strings of pearls or other beads similar to those worn in the 1920s, necklaces of bright-colored stones, earrings either small or long and hanging, and an enormous variety of costume jewelry. Women started piercing their ears. Colorful plastic jewelry in geometric shapes complemented the somewhat geometric forms evident in women's clothing. In the later half of the 60s, large decorative wristwatches appeared, and gold-colored jewelry, especially multiple gold chains, overshadowed colored beads. The bright red lipstick was replaced after 1966 by a variety of lighter, paler colors. Mascaras, eyeliners, and eyeshadows were available in colors ranging from mauve to lavender, blue, green, and even yellow. False eyelashes were commonly used. For the first part of the 70s, makeup, though much used, was supposed to create an unmade-up or natural look. Lip gloss was first used in 1971. During the period 1974 to 1980, some women abandoned brassieres and went braless. Brassieres were molded from synthetic fabrics to eliminate unsightly seam lines and provide a natural appearance under the clinging fabrics used so much during the later part of the 70s. Pantyhose with control tops took the place of girdles. Most dresses were belted or had clearly defined waistlines. Lines were soft, with shaping that followed and revealed body contours. Natural fibers made in beige and neutral colors replaced the brightly colored manufactured fibers of the 60s. Fabrics were soft and drapable, many were knitted. Some popular styles included dresses that pulled over the head, had elastic or drawstring waistlines and slightly bloused bodices. Cotton knit wrap dresses. The style originated by designer Diane von Furstenberg that tied shut with an attached belt. Pantsuits had become a staple in the wardrobe of all but the most conservative women. Made in fabrics such as knitted or textured polyester and wool gabardine and sold widely in varying prices, pantsuits were worn for work, leisure as well as evening. As discos replaced the formal dances and parties, evening clothes were not so important as in previous periods. Clothing for disco was less formal. Jeans were commonly worn. Dresses tended to be floor-length, materials were soft, clingy and knitted. For sportswear, pants were an alternative to skirts in almost all situations. In 1976, the bell-bottom was replaced by narrowed legs. Most were pleated or gathered into a waistband tapering towards the ankle and cuffed or rolled to ankle length. Jeans were a virtual uniform for casual wear. Designer jeans were popular among all age groups. Some women wore exceptionally tight jeans, conforming the body-conscious look of the period. By the mid-70s, skirts had more fullness, tended to flare out and covered the knees by at least several inches. Skirts that wrapped around the body and tied into place, and the swirl skirt made from bias cut strips of multicolored fabrics that were often from India, were part of the ethnic styles that appeared periodically. Most blouses were of soft fabrics, often knits. Many knit tops fell somewhere between a blouse and a sweater. Short or long-sleeved, made of narrow ribbed knits, they fit the body closely and ended a short distance below the waistline. The wrap-style clothing was popular in blouses as well as dresses. The film Annie Hall had a strong impact on current fashion. It helped popularize combination of layers of separates and pantsuits and men's hats for women. In 1975, Vogue magazine proclaimed the sweater as a basis for building a wardrobe. Round-neck sweaters were worn over tailored blouses, the collar being visible at the neck. This preppy look focused on Shetland wool sweaters. Long, thigh-length cardigan sweaters usually had a matching belt and were worn over trousers or skirts. The twin set was another popular style. In 1977, Japanese designer Issey Miyake combined oversized sweater tops with narrow leggings. Popular tops were t-shirts with blurbs. The focus on fitness grew. Sweatshirts in various colors were worn. Leotards were worn for exercise as well as under jeans as tops and with wrap skirts. For outdoors, coats like dresses followed body lines, flaring out gently below the waist. The belted coats became popular. Most coats ended below the knee. Down or fiber-filled coats gained popularity for winter wear. For active sportswear, tennis clothing came in a variety of colors. Stretch pants with stirrups worn with puffy parkas were fashionable in '79. Top fashion designers had begun to design ski wear in the late '70s. Bathing suits came in styles ranging from tiny string bikini to the empire style to the skirted swimming dress. Rudy Gernreich designed the thong. One-piece mallet suits were also popular. By the mid-decade, hair was becoming shorter, and for the rest of the decade, a soft, natural style was preferred. In the late '70s, some women were wearing their hair in tight, frizzy curls, a style seen on a movie star, Barbra Streisand, in the film A Star is Born. A short haircut called the wedge became popular in '76 after Olympic medal winner Dorothy Hamill wore the style. Farrah Fawcett Majors in the TV program Charlie's Angels had a full streaked blonde mane, a style popular after '77. Although hats were not an important fashion items, berets and knit caps were used in colder regions. Headscarves were also used. After 1975, slender, more graceful shoes with comfortable heels had replaced the clunky platform. Boots remained a popular item. A large variety of accessories were available. Notable among them were the handbags that included narrow rectangles, large tote bags, large soft sachets with interesting textures around, small square quilted handbags with chain shoulder straps originally designed by Chanel. Women who dressed for success carried briefcases rather than handbags. Emphasis on natural materials led to a strong interest in real leather accessories. Along with natural materials came an interest in real gold and gemstones, in particular gold chains, gold wire hoops earrings, and diamonds by the yard, designer Elsa Peretti's strings of gold chain with diamonds interspersed periodically. In '73, snakeskin covered bangle bracelets were a fad. Digital watches were first introduced in 1976. Women worked hard at using makeup to create a natural look. As hairstyles grew in volume, more hair products required to hold the style in place were made. By the end of the '70s, lipstick shades grew brighter and eye makeup more obvious. For men, undergarments continued to include boxer shorts, knitted briefs, athletic shirts, and t-shirts. Boxer shorts, already available in colors and small prints, were made in bright prints. Jockey briefs produced these garments in cotton mesh and continued to make the bikini line shorts in bright colors. By the mid-60s, continental suits were being exchanged by mod clothes. English styles with jackets padded slightly at the shoulders, wider lapels, moderate flare to the skirt, and pronounced side or center-back vents. In the early '70s, lapels were fairly wide and suits were fitted through the body. Double-knit fabrics in both manufactured and wool fibers were widely used, and trousers tended to flare at the bottom. Suits were both single and double-breasted. In the late '70s, three-piece suits with vests returned. Lapels narrowed and grew longer. The cut was looser. Men's suits were conservatively tailored, usually double-breasted, made in dark colors and smooth textured fabrics. Interest in men's fashion grew with media promoting fashions for men. Pierre Cardin was one of the first to design for menswear market. Suits with Nehru jackets appeared on the scene. After Lord Snowdon wore a formal evening Nehru suit with a white turtleneck, the trend picked up. Sweaters in the 70s fit close to the body, ending just below the waistline. In the late 70s, sweaters became larger and looser. From the early 60s, turtlenecks were accepted as an alternative to collared shirts. Shirts cut and seamed so as to follow body lines and called body shirts were popular in the 60s. Shirt collar sizes varied so that shirts would be in proportion to the lapel width of suit collars. Striped and printed shirts were popular. Suits were made for casual wear. Top and pant were usually made from the same fabrics. The unstructured tops had shirt-like collars or were collarless. Fashionable throughout the 70s, leisure suits were out of style by the end of the decade. The Peacock Revolution had a major impact on tuxedo, which were cut with more body shaping and manufactured in a wide range of colors. Burgundy, green and brown were especially popular. Shirts with ruffled front were worn with tuxedos. For sportswear, tapered slacks were replaced by the trouser bottoms. These grew wider and included some flare pant legs and wide bell bottoms. They fit close to the torso without pleats. Blue jeans moved from being work clothes to fashionable dress by the late 60s. Sports jackets followed the lines of suit jackets. Styles that were widely used were safari jackets and Norfolk-style jackets in the late 60s and 70s. Sports shirts varied with the seasons. T-shirts and polo shirts, turtlenecks, velour pullovers and shirts, jacquard patterns, knitted sweaters and sweatshirts were popular. The minuscule European bikini for men was appearing on American beaches. Synthetic knits were used for bathing suits because they dried quickly and were wrinkle-free. The Olympics influenced styles in bathing suits. Until the early 70s, white predominated for tennis. After this, men and women were more likely to be seen in colored tennis clothes. Ski clothes styles changed yearly, moving gradually towards a tighter fit and the use of fabrics designed to offer as little wind resistance as possible. Longer than shoulder-length hair was chiefly limited to high school and college-age youth or older men wishing to dramatize a personal protest, some aspect of contemporary society. Moderately long hair, beards, moustaches and sideburns had become accepted styles for all segments of society by the end of the 60s. Shorter styles returned in the late 70s. Platforms were seen on men's shoes as well, especially the youth. After hippie men wore work shoes and sandals, these entered men's fashion. Ralph Lauren made 3-inch wide ties popular in 1967 and continued till the mid-70s. With turtleneck styles, men began wearing necklaces. Bracelets and earrings were also seen. Men's hair products range also expanded. You have come to the end of this unit. To summarize, in this unit, you have learned about developments and spread of fashion across the world during the 60s and 70s. Thank you.